Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Last year, the world was shocked by the unexpected and tragic death of the lead singer of the Cranberries, Dolores O'Riordan. Now, 1 year later, the remaining members of the band are releasing its final album, In the End. The album, comprised of songs originating with O'Riordan in the demo phase, sees the band's remaining members working with her family to put out an incredibly beautiful goodbye to both fans and to themselves and the band. Everybody, please welcome from the Cranberries, Noel Hogan and Fergal Lawler. Let's hear it. Thank you so much for being here. I hesitate to say congratulations on the album. It's a really beautiful piece of work.
Thank you.
It's obviously made under really unfortunate circumstances. You had been working with Dolores on the songs prior to her untimely passing. When did you realize after that you should continue the work, that you should follow through? And how did you know what that work would look like? What would be the most respectful way to do it?
I guess it was probably maybe a month or so after she passed away. These demos were all on kind of a couple of hard drives, and they were in bits and pieces because they were songs that we kind of were working on, then we'd move on to another one. And so we were unsure about how many songs were there that were finished. So kind of over a couple of weeks, we started to put it together and bring all the vocals into the one demo type of thing. And suddenly we had this kind of playlist that we made, and you get to hear the songs back to back like you would in an album. Now they're still at the demo stage at this point, but even then you felt this is like a really, really strong album, not just another run-of-the-mill album. We were like really impressed at how well, firstly, her vocals sounded for demos, and that even the structures and the blueprints of the song were there. So we, as the three of us, decided we'd really like to finish this because, you know, Dolores had worked very hard on her side of it and was very excited about it. And the next thing we did was contact her family to see how they would feel about that. And they were actually kind of relieved that we were going to do it because they knew she really wanted it done. So they were happy to hear we were going to do that. And then it was like April, around this time last year, that we started recording it.
What was that like, recording with her demo vocals?
Yeah, it was very emotional. The first few days especially were quite overwhelming, you know, and you're kind of thinking, are we going to be able to do this? But I suppose you realize that you can't be too morbid about it. You have a job to do, and you want to do justice to the work that Dolores has left behind. And if you're kind of moping around, you're not going to give your best performance. So you kind of almost have to put that aside and try and focus on the positivity and kind of celebrate her life rather than be morbid about it, you know. And I think once we got into the swing of it and really focused on our parts, we kind of got, you know, subliminally all that emotion is coming out through what you play anyway. So it was therapeutic, I think, but we didn't really see that till afterwards. I think, you know, it was stressful enough.
Was there a sense of, obviously, I mean, you said in the demos you heard that the songs back to back felt like a really great album, and I agree, it's an incredibly strong album. Given the circumstances or not, I think it's a really strong album. But was there a part of you, because listening to it, it did to me feel like you had somehow really tapped into the first couple albums from the band while at the same time not repeating anything. But there was something about it that felt like, oh, this feels like this band is real, like has somehow just tapped back into this period.
Yeah, we started to feel that way. I guess after the first week, we used to work from kind of Monday to Friday, and then you'd go home, you kind of take the weekend off, and you listen through to what you did during the week. And even after that first week, you kind of start to realize, hold on, this is like even better than I hoped it would be. And you start to hear those influences of what we grew up listening to, like bands like The Cure and The Smiths and New Order. And I think when people hear the album as a whole, they'll see what I'm saying about that. You'll hear, like, we very much kind of leaned in towards that because we loved that music growing up. And particularly those first couple of albums, you know, you're trying to be those bands because, you know, that's why you begin doing this. So it was great to kind of come full circle and end up with an album that is very close to those first albums and going back to your kind of early influences.
Yeah, what's wonderful about it too is you can always tell when a band is trying to go back to those first two albums and it feels inauthentic. This doesn't feel like that at all.
I think it was because Dolores' vocal is quite soft on this album, more so than the last few albums. She's kind of being more delicate kind of vulnerability, I suppose, in her voice, which was what the first two albums were like also. So that kind of subliminally led us to kind of hold back a bit, I suppose, you know, and to, so like we did in the first two albums, we were kind of more delicate back then. So I think that's why it's a bit like that as well.
Take me back to the first time you guys met her. She auditioned for the band, right?
Yeah. We had a guy with us for about 6 months, and he was a friend of ours. He lived near us, and he left the band, and we kind of started writing these instrumental songs because that was all we could do at the time. We didn't really know any cover versions. We'd literally bought our instruments and started the band. So it was like...
Did you know how to play?
No.
So you bought instruments
We were
and learned
really
how to...
winging it as we went along.
That's great.
Yeah. So that same guy, Niall was his name, I bumped into him in the street. He said, "Oh, are you still looking for a singer?" And I was like, yeah. And because my girlfriend knows this girl. So the following Sunday, up he comes with Dolores, and Dolores comes in, you know, this tiny little shy girl, barely saying a word to anyone. She had this tiny keyboard under her arm and got talking to her. Everybody was polite, and, you know, she was very nervous. And because we were there, there's the three of us and about 10 of our friends who used to just hang around all the time. So anyway, she sang, I think it was 2 songs that she had kind of written herself. And then we played, I think Linger might have been one of the ones. We played like an instrumental version of it.
I had read somewhere, and correct me if this is wrong, that you heard her playing the opening chords of Linger or something like that, but she didn't know how to play at all. And you guys were like,
we had that before
You
we
had
ever
that,
met her.
okay.
Yeah. So we, you know, when she started singing, we were like, I can't believe she's not in a band already. Like,
Right.
what's wrong here? Because that voice came out of this tiny, tiny girl. And she wasn't like the Dolores that everyone got to know later on. She was super shy. But yeah, she took away the cassette and came back about a week later. And she goes, I've worked on that song. And she goes, can you play it? And next of all, you know, that the version of Linger that everybody knows was basically the original version. She started singing those lyrics. That voice came out, and that was it. You know, that's how we began.
wow. Talk to me about the significance of this cover, this choice here.
Yeah, it was difficult to come up with ideas for a cover and for a video because, you know, we obviously didn't want to use just the three of us. It would be disrespectful, and we didn't want to use just a photograph of Dolores because, you know, it's new material. You want something to be moving forward. It's all new. You don't want to use old material. So we spoke to Callie, our art director, who worked on the first 3 Cranberries albums with the couch, and that was his idea as well. And he said, how about having children who are related to each band member in some way?
These are each your relation.
Yeah, in some way, yeah.
Wow.
But he kind of said, don't tell anyone who they are because he wants to leave that element of mystery, which is nice. But he was kind of saying it's
Wondering what the pause was there when I.
yeah, he kind of said it's like symbolizes us when we were kids and also the new generation of Cranberries fans. So it's really sweet, and everyone seems to like it.
And the producer that you brought on for this album is a producer that you worked with before, right?
Yeah, Stephen Street, who's done, I think this is our 8th album, and Stephen's probably done about 5 of those albums, maybe 6 even. And we trust him, you know, like so much, and he's often been referred to as the 5th member of the band. He knew us when we were basically kids and kind of has, you know, very much helped us shape the sound that we wanted to get. And the fact, like, we asked for him in the beginning because he had just come off the back of the first Morrissey album, the Viva Hate, that he kind of actually co-wrote that album with him. And he'd done all those Smiths albums, and we were huge Smiths fans. I don't think we actually thought he'd do it. You know, we kind of took a chance and asked our kind of A&R guy would he approach him. And to our surprise, he did. And when we decided to do this album, there was really no other discussion had about who it would be that would produce it. Particularly Stephen and Dolores had a really special relationship because he really knew how to get the best out of her, and he would know more than anyone how to deal with these vocals that we had and what way to treat them. So I think the album sounds as good as it does, and he's a lot to do with that.
How do you work with a producer when you already have vocals recorded, which essentially means you already have the hooks down at that point? You're not really going in and being like, you know, here's a riff, here's an idea that I have, let's figure out, you know, how the song goes from there. You're basically going in with the main construction of the songs.
Yeah, like we've always done that. We'd always had the album written before we ever went in. We're not really ones for going in and jamming and see what happens on the day. So in that sense, it wasn't really a new way of for us to do it. And also, Dolores didn't like to hang around studios when she didn't have to do her parts. So she'd come in and kind of lay down a couple of guide vocals for us to work with. And she'd go away and come back maybe in the evening or even a couple of days later sometimes. So we've kind of done this type of work before in that sense. Obviously, the difference was if there was, on a guide vocal, it's a guide and you just say, look, Dolores will be in later, she'll fix that part. We didn't have that luxury this time. But we only picked the vocals that were good enough for a song. There's other songs that are there that the vocals weren't as good as these, and we decided very early on we weren't going to put any of that stuff on there. Even the album ended up being like 6 tracks or whatever it might be, that it all had to be of a certain quality.
But it is definitely not 6 tracks. It's
11 we ended up with.
Yeah.
And there's about 3 more that were close, but they just weren't up to this standard. So we'll never use those. They'll just be left on the drive.
Now, forgive this question if it's in any way disrespectful. I definitely don't mean it to be. But the album is released. Do you guys, obviously, you're from an era where you release an album, you tour with it. How do you feel about that at this point? Would you even consider something like that?
No, it was something we were talking about when we were recording, kind of, realizing that we'll never get to tour this. That when we were in the studio playing these songs, that was the last time. And you just accept it. That's the way it is. We've done plenty of touring in the past, and it's been great. And the thing you do miss is that when you play a song in the studio and record it, it's a certain way. But then when you bring that song out live, it kind of evolves into something a bit more dynamic and a bit harder. Maybe it's a harder edge to songs when you play them live because you have to be louder, and so that's what we kind of miss. These songs won't get that treatment. But what can you do?
Speaking of harder songs, what was it like for you guys as a band? This is a bit of a memory lane question, but when Zombie broke the way that it did, I mean, that was an era where a song breaking, an alternative rock song breaking, meant something completely different than it means now.
Yeah, I guess, we were probably more surprised than anybody because
How old were you guys?
21, the early 20s. Because we had Linger and Dreams were really big hits before that.
Yeah.
So we were on A level at that point. But then when Zombie hit, it just...
They were global hits too,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Linger and Dreams, yeah.
Everywhere, worldwide. It broke here in the States first. Because the album had come out over kind of our part of the world, in Ireland and the UK. But it just didn't do anything. I think it didn't even make the top 100. So... we had kind of at one point even thought we were going to get dropped, that it wasn't going to happen. And then out of the blue, we got a call to come over here because Linger had kind of really taken off on college radio. Then MTV picked up on it, and it just, it went from strength to strength. And we were kind of at a really good place at that point. But then when Zombie came out soon after that again, I mean, we did not expect that at all, especially from a song that's so hard, and even the subject matter of the song it's dark. But it was played non-stop.
Did Zombie take you to a place where with Linger and Dreams, it was oh, we're a band, we can make money doing this and we can live and this is really nice, and then Zombie came out and it's okay, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Now we have to check everything that we're doing here. Did it feel like that?
Yeah, I became a bit more conscious of aware of people kind of looking and pointing, that kind of thing.
And money and fame and all of the trappings that come with rock stardom at that point.
The thing was, we were so busy. We worked and worked and worked all the time, especially those first 3 albums. There was a 6-year period where all we did was the band. We really had no lives outside of that. So even though we had all those kind of, the riches that come with that, you wouldn't even know because we were all still living at home with our parents. So if we had a week off.
During Zombie?
Yeah, go home and be asked, where were you till this hour? It was all the things that...
Mom, I have a hit song. Leave me alone.
It was very much like that, yeah.
And this is coming from you guys not even knowing how to play instruments. How much prior to that? How long was it?
3 years, was it?
So you went from 3 years,
touring, you see, makes you learn your instrument really fast, and you got to get professional and tight, and you know, you'd be surprised how fast you get good after 6 months touring. It's unbelievable.
Fear is a good incentive, you know, when you're standing in front of a crowd.
You guys have said that this album is a goodbye. It's a goodbye to the Cranberries. Did you know that it was going to be a goodbye when you went in to start recording it? Was it like because of what happened with Dolores, this is going to be the goodbye, or was it something that you realized while recording it? We shouldn't go on after.
No,
this?
we kind of knew beforehand, and the fact that we even had this album, you know, we consider ourselves really lucky, because if we hadn't done the demos and had the, you know, everything we had to make this album, the band would have ended really, you know, on the 15th of January last year, the day Dolores passed away. So it's like not a lot of bands are in the position that we're in, that you get to even say goodbye. It just comes to an end and that's it. But we knew, you know, like without Dolores, that it's not the band. And, you know, we were just happy that we got to do this and kind of do this whole run of things one last time.
What was it like working with her family on the album, or at least showing them the album in different stages or in its completion?
Yeah, when we asked them about it, you know, we kind of said, look, we'd like to finish the album. They said, great. You know, they gave us their blessing, and they kind of said, we trust you. You know what you're doing. Give it to us when it's finished. So when it was finished, we gave them the album to listen to. But her mom didn't listen to it because she just felt it's a bit too soon. But her brothers and sister listened to it, and they absolutely loved it. They kind of said it was like classic Cranberries, and she'd be very proud. So once you hear that, it's kind of like, okay, great.
What does that make you feel like when someone says classic Cranberries?
It's nice. It's a nice.
Okay.
Yeah. It's.
You never know. Some people are like, that's great. And some people are like, you know, do not point out that I can be classic at this point.
Yeah. No, it's good. Like the fact that you can be even considered as a classic of anything, we take it as a good thing, because like we were 4 kids from a really small town in Ireland that just loved playing music, that grew to be this massive band that we didn't expect it. And
What town?
a place called Limerick.
Limerick?
It's grown a lot since we grew up there. Now the last kind of 20 years, it's a lot bigger now.
Was there an actual music scene while you were there, or did you guys feel like you were really the only ones who listened to these
it
groups?
was a healthy music scene back kind of the late 80s into the early 90s. Kind of anyone of our age would have been in a band, really. And we all kind of hung around in one place. There was one studio that had rehearsal rooms. So it was cool. It was great because everybody knew each other. And if you had a gig, you give someone an opening that, for that gig, and then vice versa. So it was a really, really good vibe, and a good way to learn your craft as well.
And everybody was listening to similar bands and talking about similar bands at the time. Yeah. I think we have some questions from our audience. We have 2 questions. Who has a question? Someone has right here. Hi.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I actually have a couple questions. One is, really, you started a band without really knowing how to play instruments. Like, how did that discussion start? Like, let's go buy a guitar? That was my first. And my second is always, because I grew up with your music, why the name The Cranberries?
Okay, the first question. As Noel said, there was kind of a healthy music scene in Limerick, but we kind of didn't realise that until we were maybe 16, 17, because we were listening to like The Cure, The Smiths, and all these bands. And then a friend of mine was a DJ in radio, and he was playing Irish music in local bands. And I said, my God, there's actually bands in Limerick. So I went to see a few gigs, and I was like a year older, so I could get into these places. And I told the guys about it. And then there was some open air festivals, and I said, come and see this band or whatever. And then we started seeing local bands, and we kind of said, well, these are guys from Limerick. They have instruments, they're playing a band. Why don't we get instruments and see if we can do this as well? So I got a drum kit for Christmas, and then in the following February, Mike and Noel got their guitars and started getting lessons, and that was it. We just started playing then.
I mean, and that's probably why you were... Oh, we'll get to the Cranberries questions in just a second. Don't worry. That is also probably why you were able to come up with an original sound that was your own, because you didn't really know how to mimic anybody yet. You just knew basic chords.
That's the thing, and we've often said it, if we were better musicians, we might have destroyed that first album. We'd have been trying to do all this fancy stuff, but it was the simplicity, I think, that really kind of connected with people. And we were like that, for certainly the first few years. And the lack of kind of, I guess, musical knowledge, you couldn't go off and do cover versions because you just couldn't figure them out. So it forced you to go and write your own songs. And for us, that was a blessing that we didn't realize at the time. It was very frustrating.
And that's what happened with so many of the great bands from like 77 on through into the 90s. The Ramones to Joy
Yeah.
Division, all these. Even U2 said that they didn't really know anything about
Yeah.
how to play their instruments when they. That's why Edge came up with the sound, because he didn't know what else to do.
Yeah, and all those bands that you mentioned have their own sound that is very unique to them. And I think, that combination of us kind of winging it a bit and Dolores' voice is, became what is now known as the Cranberries sound.
And then why the Cranberries is a name?
You want to go? So Niall, the chap who sang before Dolores, that we mentioned briefly, he had this kind of wacky sense of humor. So he came up with the idea when he was with us. The Cranberries saw us, as in SAW, not sauce, which is a terrible name. But we went, yeah, that's fine, let's do that. Then Dolores joined, but we still held on to that name. But everybody, like if we were doing a gig, people would go, the Cranberries run next. Everyone kind of just dropped the sauce anyway. So eventually, without really making a big deal of it, we just kind of, it started to live with us. That it felt better as well. And
How did people respond when you tried to correct them? When you were like, it's actually Cranberry.
I think you
no,
would-
whatever, man.
we were
Like,
too embarrassed
Yeah.
to kind of just
So
go,
was that
yeah.
Cranberries?
No,
Yeah, that's
we
fine.
live with that.
I was
yeah.
always embarrassed of the
Yeah,
sauce
yeah.
part anyway.
One more question.
Hi.
Hi.
I was curious how you guys, as artists and people, stay creatively stimulated between two albums and between two tours when you're on downtime, if you have it.
Yeah, like I find that getting away from it for a while helps a lot because you can burn out and run out of ideas. And then it's weird, like there are times even over the years where you think I've run out of ideas, I'm never going to write a song again. And then suddenly you could be sitting down watching TV, but you're kind of strumming on the guitar and 2 or 3 chords might just glue together in a certain way. And suddenly it, that launches a whole idea. And something like that for the song we just heard a while ago, it was literally like that. It was just a couple of chords that sparked an idea. And then, you start to hear the rest of it in your head. But I mean, influences-wise, or, what kind of motivates you it is just the love of music, because we've all walked away from it every now and again, and we take a year out and you try not to be involved in it. But you'll go to a gig or you'll hear a song on the radio. There'll be something that you'll go, I really want to play again. And then we'd all end up just ringing each other, and suddenly you're back on a tour somewhere in the world. And it's great. Look, it's great to have that choice that we've been together for nearly 30 years. So to be able to come away from it and go back has been a gift.
Now, you didn't like going to studios unless you had songs already constructed. Where did you guys go to construct your songs? Or did you sort of do them separately and then come together and show each other what you had?
Well, Noel and Dolores would kind of come up with their ideas separately, and then we'd find a rehearsal room somewhere and kind of play around and keep playing with the ideas, just so we get kind of an idea of the structure of the song before we go into the studio. Because we were just never one of those bands who like going into the studio but nothing. You kind of felt like you're going to the studio to record the album. Why would you go in if you have nothing?
Right.
So we always
set a
kind
pile
like
of money on
prepared.
fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we like to go in prepared.
Well, guys, I love the album. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's that classic Cranberries sound. Wonderful that you were able to put this together, and an incredible swan song. Please give Noel and Fergal a huge round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.